Meathead is the author of the book Meathead, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, which I'm told is currently the #4 best-selling cookbook on Amazon. He is also the founder and editor of AmazingRibs.com, which is a fantastic website. Honestly, I bought my first smoker this summer, and I cannot count the number of times that I've ended up on AmazingRibs.com, just Googling for something. Like this past weekend, I wasn't sure how to know when the ribs are done, so I searched for how ribs are done. I ended up on his website, and I learned all about the bend test. So Meathead's here to... So anyway, he's here. Meathead's here to bust some myths and to tell us all the rest of his secrets beyond the bend test. Please welcome Meathead.
Thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be here. I wouldn't be here without the great love and respect Google search has given my website. And thanks, Chris, for the first-person testimonial there. The book is called The Science of Barbecue and Grilling, and that, I think, might appeal to some of you. We are in the year 2016. It is an age of technology, and we really wanted to know what happens under the hood of the grill and the smoker. If you've ever been to Austin, or if you know much about barbecue, the hottest restaurant in the country is Franklin Barbecue in Austin. And I was thrilled to hear Aaron Franklin say in his book that mine is an amazing compendium of barbecue knowledge. It's really a lifelong labor of work and effort. It's about 400 pages, 400 photographs. I did most of the photography myself. The chapter titles are The Science of Heat. We talk about the 3 different kinds of heat that you'll deal with on a grill. The science of fire, the science of smoke. There are different kinds of smoke. There are good tasting smoke and bad tasting smoke. We'll touch upon that a little bit. There's some meat science, food science. What is in meat? What is in vegetables? What happens when meat hits heat? There's a lengthy discussion of hardware, the different types of grills and smokers, which work, which don't work, and accessories and gadgets, because the one with the most gadgets wins. And there's a lot of technique. It's about 400 pages, and about the first half of the book is this textual or background information that if you buy the book, and you should, and Father's Day is just around the corner, you want to start at the beginning because it makes sense, it flows. As much as we all love the internet, I hear from a lot of people who might Google how to cook a brisket. They find my site, they go to the brisket page, they click on a link, they jump to another page, they click on a link, and they start gathering knowledge. But there's big holes when you're jumping around using hyperlinks. And the book, you know, there's still a place for dead tree. And it flows. It flows in a sequence, and I'm very pleased with the way the book flows, so I'd recommend it. And then something that we'll do today, a lot of myth busting. I'm not a scientist, but I've worked with a number of scientists to help me. I was a journalist by training, and journalists and scientists have one thing in common. My wife is a scientist. She's a very high-ranking food safety expert for the FDA, a PhD. As a journalist, we're both trained to ask, how do you know that to be true? How do you know that? When people say, I mean, in this political season, that's a good question for us all to be asking. How do you know that to be true? Can you prove that? And that's a question I'm constantly asking, because I learned to barbecue from Dad. I went out back with him, first time probably 8, 9 years old, and watched him grill up some beef ribs, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. And the fact that he might have let me have a sip of beer while he was cooking might have piqued my interest a bit. But it was great fun, and I learned to grill from Dad. And he learned to grill from his dad, and he learned to grill from his dad. And there's these old husband's tales, I call them, that are passed down from generation to generation of backyard cooks. We started asking, how do you know that to be true? And we found that a lot of them aren't true, that a lot of them don't hold water, don't work. So in addition to the myth busting and the science, then there's about 118 recipes, starting with brines, rub sources, all the meat groups and side dishes, and they kind of exemplify that which is in the technique section. And then, of course, my website. If you run into a question in the book, I and our moderators, and we pay our moderators, which is most unusual for websites. We actually pay them. There's a really talented team. We're in there every day answering questions 24/7. If you ask a question at 2 in the morning, you might have to wait a little bit for an answer. But we really try to hold people's hands. We get a lot of questions like, help. I've got the meat on the grill now, and it's not going up in temperature, and the guests are coming in 15 minutes. What do I do? Happy to be there. Happy to do that. We do it all the time. And the website has about 1,000 pages, again, recipes, technique, and we have buying guides in there. So if you're in the market for a grill or a smoker, here's a job description. If you ever get tired of working at Google, which is obviously a great place to work, and please don't misinterpret this as me trying to pirate anybody, but there's a guy who works for me who's got the best job title in the world. Max Good, we call him Keeper of the Flame, but his job is testing grills and smokers. So that's his job. He just goes out back, fires it up, puts in the thermometers, puts in the testing gear, cooks a bunch of food, writes notes, writes reviews of grills and smokers. Cool job. I wish I had it. And we also have an electrical engineer who tests thermometers. We'll talk about thermometers in a minute. But thermometers are one of the most important things you can have as an outdoor cook or an indoor cook. And we have a guy who tests them against factory specs. So there's buying guides, and we have community. We have people. We have a section called the Pitmaster Club. Actually, I talk about this briefly. I don't get to talk about it, but this is an audience who might appreciate this. We do not have a major publishing company that owns us. We do not have a network television show that owns us. We're freestanding. I founded it myself in 2005 with pocket money. I've had no debt. It's always been profitable. Thank you, Google. Our new business model is we set up a special section called the Pitmaster Club that costs $24 a year. And we have about 14,000 members in the past year joined in. It's a little more than a year old. You can do the math. That's a working business model for a small business. And the Pitmaster Club has a community and a lot of fun stuff in it. So we're finding ways to make a living as advertising rates nosedive and other revenue streams are problematic. I wrote the book and the website with the help of Professor Greg Blonder. His name is on the cover. He's our science advisor. He's a engineer at Boston University. He used to be head of research at Bell Labs. He's a food scientist, a physicist, engineer, really remarkable man. Dr. Mata, who's a meat scientist. My wife, Dr. Tortorello, who's a food safety expert. I have a Culinary Institute trained chef who tests recipes. So it's a real good team. And anybody here know the name Kenji Lopez-Alt? Yeah, I see a few hands go up. Kenji wrote a book, came out last fall, called The Food Lab. And it is phenomenal. If you don't have it, you need it. It's probably better than my book. It's about 800 pages. It's really good food science. Unfortunately, when Kenji wrote it, he lived here in New York. He didn't have a backyard grill, so there's nothing about barbecue and grilling in there. So my book makes a good companion. He wrote the foreword, and it is just dynamite. It's my favorite cookbook right now. That's it there. What's interesting going on in the culinary world right now is that there have been food writers forever. But there's this new genre of food writers emerging. Started with the food scientist Harold McGee and Shirley Corriher. They're our grandparents. Alton Brown, everybody here knows Alton Brown. Christopher Kimball from Cooks Illustrated. Kenji, Nathan Burvold from Modernist Cuisine. The Chef Steph's people in Seattle. We're all really into teaching people what happens when you cook. We no longer want just a recipe. How do you do this? What do I do? Tell me step 1, step 2, step 3. We want to know why. Why am I doing this? Why is this happening? And I call us the nerdists. You know, in the art world, you have the cubists and the modernists and the impressionists. Well, we're the nerdists in the culinary world. And there's more and more of us coming around. You'll see this. It's a trend in cookbooks. That's kind of the direction that the website and the book are going. So rather than give you a chat on everything I know about barbecue, because that's in the book, I thought I'd take on the subject of these old husband's tales, take on a few of the more popular, enduring myths that many of you probably hold, and see if we can bust them to smithereens. Let's start with thermometers. The myth, thermometers are for sissies. I don't need a thermometer. I can tell when it's done by poking it or cutting into it. The thing you need to have when you're cooking is control. You need control of every little aspect of the process, but most of all, you need control of temperature. You need to know what temperature the oven is. You need to know what temperature the food is. A medium rare steak is 130 to 135 degrees. It's not 140 or 120. It's 130 to 135. At medium rare, the food scientists with the fake jaws that chew meat and tell us how much resistance and how much moisture it have taught us that medium rare is when steak is at its most juicy and tender. We didn't need a machine to tell us that. If you love steak, you know that intuitively. If you want your steak medium rare, you don't put it out there and cook it for 8 minutes on one side and 5 minutes on the next side, because you have no idea if that's going to be adequate. The temperature of that meat is dependent on its thickness. The thicker the meat, the longer it takes for the heat to be transmitted down to the center. Now, the hot air doesn't cook the interior of the meat. It can't get in there. The hot air cooks the outside of the meat and only the outside of the meat. As the outside of the meat heats up, it transmits the heat down towards the center. So the outside of the meat cooks the inside of the meat. The thicker the meat, the longer it takes for the energy to move towards the center. So you can't take a recipe that says 5 minutes on one side, 4 minutes on the other, unless you know how thick it is. And of course, the other big variable is the temperature. What is the air temp? And the air temp is important, but I mentioned there's different types of heat. When we cook on a grill, you have air temp, which is the convection airflow. You have conduction, which is the temperature of the metal. The metal is about 8,000 times more energy than the air. And then there's radiant heat, or infrared heat, that comes from the coals or the gas jets. And they're different heats with different levels of energy. And the best way to understand this is go out and fire up your grill and bring it up to about 225. And that's not too hot. That's a good number, by the way, to try to shoot for most cooking. Now, lift the lid and put your arm in there. You can actually hold your arm in 225 for a little while. It doesn't burn too much. It's warm in there, but you can hold it in there maybe for a minute, or do it with your oven inside. Now, put your hand on the cooking grates. Well, it's 225. When you get back from the hospital, you'll know that everything that's 225 doesn't have the same amount of energy. Air conducts less energy than metal. Water conducts energy at a different rate than metal. So does oil, frying. So they all can conduct energy at different rates. And so you need to know what you're doing with them. And the best way to know is with thermometers. Now, this shouldn't come as a shock to a technologically oriented audience like you, but you would not believe how many knuckle draggers there are out there who just say, I don't need no thermometers, they're for sissies. This is 2016. You can get really good digital thermometers that the top of the line is something called the Thermopen. And it takes about 2 seconds to read the temperature of your meat. So you can stick it in the meat, and in 2 seconds, you get a precision number, and you know if it's medium rare or not, or well done. And as you back it out gently, it's got a little tiny sensor, too. It's really small, so you can actually back it out of the meat and take progressive readings as you go. It costs about $100. You don't have to spend $100. There's another one called the Thermopop. It looks like a little lollipop. And it costs $30, and it takes 5 seconds to read. So $30 for 5 seconds, $100 for 2 seconds. Both of them are great. You've seen the Thermopen on television. A lot of the cooking shows, the chefs use them. Go get yourself a really good digital food thermometer so you know exactly the temperature of your food. because you can't poke the meat and tell. Now, if I work in Morton's Steakhouse and I'm cooking the same steaks, cut the same thickness from the same cattle in the same ovens every night the same way, yeah, I can poke the meat and I can tell. But I'm a pretty good cook, and I cook outdoors a lot, and I cannot tell for sure by poking, because a sirloin feels different than a filet mignon. And my hand, and then there's, this is the silly one. All the books say, well, if your hand is flexed like this, that's medium rare, and if you clench your fist, that's medium, and if you clench it hard, that's well done. I mean, everybody's hand is different. Fat guys' hands feel different than skinny guys' hands. A person who works out feels different than a person who doesn't. So thermometer is the only way to go. And if you really want to do it upright, you want to get yourself another thermometer, not just for the meat, but for the oven. And a grill, by the way, or a smoker, is just an outdoor oven. So you want to get a thermometer that has a probe that you can sit next to the meat on the grill surface. That thermometer on your grill, that dome thermometer, when the guy who's in charge of purchasing for the grill company, he's given a really small budget, and he buys the cheapest thermometer he can buy, and it's a piece of junk. Just put duct tape over it, ignore it. Among other things, it's up in the dome, and the food is down here. Now, if you plan to eat the dome, it's useful. But you're going to eat the food, so you want a probe that you can place near the meat. And by the way, don't place it too close, because there's a cold air bubble right around the meat. You want to put it about 2 inches away or 1 inch away next to the meat on the surface. And now you know the temperature of the air the meat is feeling. So you know what you're cooking at. Now you have control. This is an example. Readers, I've written this for years, and readers have been sending me pictures of their digital thermometer compared to the dial thermometer on their grill. And you can see. To the left, 297 versus 397, even 100 degrees off. 254 versus 210. Can you imagine if you cooked indoors, if your thermometer, if your thermostat was that far off? I mean, it usually is a little off, but that far off, 100-degree difference? You need to know with a digital thermometer what your temperature is. And also, get yourself a good meat temperature guide. We publish a small one like this that you can buy on Amazon for $5, and there's a big long one that's got all kinds of numbers on it for $10, and it's magnetic. Stick to the refrigerator door. Now you know the temperatures that USDA recommends, and the chart also gives you the temperatures that chefs recommend, which is often different than what USDA recommends. Okay, here's another myth. Cook the chicken until the juices run clear. Cooks in the audience? I presume most of you are cooks, right? You know this. You cook the chicken, you slice into it, and by the thigh bone, right down by the thigh bone. You've seen that, haven't you? That ugly, purple, bloody-looking meat down by the thigh bone. There's a reason that's purple, and it's not unsafe. If you cook it to 160 to 165 degrees, it's safe. If you use a thermometer, it's safe. The reason it's purple down there is chickens go from egg to grocery store shelf in 7.5 weeks, often just 7 weeks. 3.5 pounds of growth, from 0 to 3.5 pounds in just under 2 months. I mean, that's phenomenal growth rate. And they're not allowed to use hormones. They've just fine-tuned the breeding and the feeding of these animals. The problem is the bones haven't had a chance to fully calcify. They're not hard all around. They're still soft. These are like babies. The bones aren't hard, and blood is manufactured inside the bones. And you see this particularly on the thigh bone. Ugly and as scary as that looks, that chicken is safe. I measured the temp. It was 180, actually. Well, 160 to 165 is safe. Well over safe temp. Only a thermometer will tell you if it's safe. So, of course, my wife, the food safety expert, knows all this. But if I bring in a chicken like this and I say, honey, I swear I used my $100 Thermapen. It's 180, 160 is safe. She'll pop it in the microwave. It just, pink chicken is kind of weird, isn't it? Another myth. Follow recipe cooking times. So they'll tell you, you're going to have, this is a graphic, is your Christmas roast. That's your prime rib roast, right? It's about 10 inches long, about 4 inches thick. And that's a 7-bone roast on the top. And they'll tell you cook it for, 8 minutes a pound, 20 minutes. I don't know what they'd say it is. But they'll give you a number, depending on the temperature of your oven. How many minutes per pound to cook it. But the funny thing is the top one, the second one, and the third one all take the same time to cook. Yet they weigh vastly different amounts. And the reason they take the same time to cook is they're all 4 inches thick. So the heat moving from the outside to the center takes the same amount of time. So the weight is not the determining factor in how long it takes to cook. It's the thickness that matters the most. Now the bottom one will cook faster because it's only 3 inches wide. So that's the narrowest diameter instead of 4 inches. It'll cook faster. Cool, huh? Searing seals in the juices. Another long-lasting myth. We can't get rid of it. Started by some guy back in the 1800s in Germany, and it just won't go away. Meat fibers are not balloons. They don't fill up with water, and when you put them over heat, they just clamp shut and the juices won't come out. These are 2 steaks that you can see here. They're seared well. They're brown on the surface, and there's juices on the surface. The searing does not seal in the juices. And in fact, if you take 2 steaks, identical, cut from side by side from the same piece of meat, weigh the same, sear one first, don't sear the other, put them in the oven or in the grill and cook them to the same internal temperature, bring them out and weigh them, the seared one will weigh less. It'll have more moisture loss. Why? Because it's hotter. When you sear, heat drives moisture out. But don't worry. An 8-ounce steak contains 6 ounces of water. It's 70 to 75% water. You can stick a thermometer in it. It's not going to go psh and deflate. You can even turn it with a fork, and all the books say, no, don't do that, don't do that. They'll arrest you if they, tongs are better, but you're not going to lose that much moisture. An 8-ounce filet mignon has 6 ounces of water in it. Not to worry. Searing does not seal in the juices, but searing is important. Searing is wonderful. Brown is beautiful. When you're cooking, you want brown on the surface. Brown is a result of the Maillard reaction and caramelization. 2 chemical reactions. Maillard reaction is proteins and amino acids with some sugars. Caramelization is mostly sugars. But regardless of the chemistry involved, they're the surface of the meat or the potato or the asparagus or whatever you're cooking. The surface changes chemistry. The heat alters the chemistry of the surface. So what you end up with is a lot of new chemical compounds that are really flavorful. You really like the taste of seared foods. So you do want to sear. Don't worry about the little bit of moisture loss. There's plenty of moisture left in there. You want as much brown as you can get. Now, normally when I do something like this, I say if you have a question, feel free to interrupt me. We're going to take time at the end for Q&A. I'm having a rough time seeing out there, but if I skip something or if I'm ambiguous, wave your hand. Oh, they just turned up the lights a bit. Wave your hands and just go ahead and interrupt me. I mean, let's be friends here, and because I'm moving fast. So if you've got a question, throw something at me. Get my attention. Okay, we doing okay so far? Anybody got a question so far? Doing good? Okay. So we talked about searing. What about grill marks? All the cookbooks teach you put the meat down for a couple of minutes and get grill marks going one way, then pick it up and rotate it 45 degrees and get the grill marks going the other way. And you get this pattern of cross-hatched grill marks. And you see this on restaurant menu pictures. You see it on packaged goods, when you buy a frozen chicken breast, a TV dinner or something. They all show you grill marks. Well, the Maillard reaction is this browning of new flavors. So when you get grill marks, remember, the surface of the grill grates, 8,000 times more energy than the air. it's going to make those sear marks on there, and that's Maillard reaction. That's good. But look at all the interstices, the spaces between the grill marks. Now that we're supposed to have Pavlovian response when we see grill marks, I see not something that makes my saliva run. I see unfulfilled potential. I see meat that hasn't reached its, like a child that never finishes school. Now the top steak, that's what I want to see. That's Maillard reaction. Edge to edge, top to bottom. That's maximum flavor. That steak, by the way, is from a place called Prime House in Chicago, which won our top steak award according to Chicago Magazine last year. I love that place. And that's the way I want to see my steaks look. No grill marks for me. Maximum. Now, sometimes you can't help it. I mean, if you're doing shrimp, you don't have time to leave it out there and let it brown all over. If you do that, you're going to have rock-hard, bone-dry shrimp. Okay. Another myth. Get your grill screaming hot. Oh, this is such a guy thing. You know, pedal to the metal. Get it as hot as you can possibly give it. Give it all she's got, Scotty. Don't do it. We cook too hot. Use what we call the two-zone system. You can see on one side, we've got the charcoal pushed all the way to one side. On a gas grill, I think that's the next slide. Let's see if I got a picture of it. Yeah. On a gas grill, turn on 1 or 2 burners, leave the other 1 or 2 off. Hey, how do I make this go backwards? Red, oh. See, I've just been hitting the green. You told me that earlier, and I forgot. I thought red was stop, not go backwards. Okay, so 2 zones. Hot zone and not hot zone. On the hot zone, we have direct radiant heat. That's the other type of heat we haven't talked about. We talked about convection heat, and we talked about conduction heat. The conduction is from the hot metal surfaces or from the outside of the meat cooking the inside of the meat. That's conduction. This is radiant heat. Infrared radiation. Just like you get out there on a beautiful sunny day. We sat out on the patio out for lunch. Chris took us outside. How lovely. You feel that radiant heat on the back of your neck. That's infrared radiant heat. And that's a different kind of heat. It's not as hot as conduction from the metal grates, but it's hotter than warm air, convection air flow. On the left-hand side of the grill, you can see the charcoal is not under the meat. It's cooking by convection flow, gentle air flow. And that's where you want to do most of your cooking. You don't want to cook over the charcoals most of the time. You don't want to cook over the burners most of the time. You can throw some wood pellets or some wood chunks or some chips on the charcoal, and you'll get smoke traveling around in there, and you'll get the grill flavor. But now on the indirect side, you can gently heat the meat. I like to shoot for 225 on the indirect side. And that takes a while. It takes a while to cook the meat. But how many of you have immolated a chicken so that it's black on the outside and barely cooked on the inside? You don't have to raise your hands. I know. All of us. Do this with your chickens. Put that bird on the indirect side. Gently warm it. Safe temperature for chicken, 160 to 165. At 165 degrees, you kill all microbes in about 7 seconds. You don't want to monkey around with chicken. Consumer Reports did a research project last year that they tested 300 chicken breasts from around the country. 90% or more had pathogenic bacteria. And of those, half of them had antibiotic-resistant pathogens. Don't want to undercook chicken unless you got somebody you don't like at the table. So you want to put that chicken on the indirect side and gently warm it and bring it up to about 140 or 145 internal temperature. Use your digital thermometer, probe it. And when it gets there, then you move it over the hot side. Skin down, lift the lid, because right now it's being surrounded by hot air when it's on the indirect side. If you lift the lid, now all the infrared energy is pounding on the underside. And you're beating that infrared energy right into the skin, and you're rendering the fat, and you're crisping that skin. Stand there and watch it. Don't go for a beer. Don't go take a piss, because that thing will burn in a hurry. And just keep an eye on it. And when you've got GBD, golden brown and delicious, when you've got GBD on that chicken skin, flip it over and get the other side. and then you're done. And if you test it, you'll be around 160. And we call this the reverse sear. You sear at the end of the cook, not the beginning. If you sear at the beginning, all that energy pounds into the meat, and it slowly works its way down in. And so what you end up with is an overcooked exterior, and then just below it, another layer that's slightly overcooked. On a steak, you'll end up with a dark brown layer, then a brown layer, then a tan layer, then a pink layer, and then maybe in the middle you'll have some medium rare. So you don't want to sear in the beginning. You sear at the end, and the reverse sear technique will give you even color from the indirect convection airflow, even color, even temperature, top to bottom, left to right on the indirect side. Then when you move it over and sear it, you'll get that beautiful crust. What you're doing now is you're cooking the interior separately from the exterior, because you have two separate goals. Interior, safe target temperature, maximum tenderness and juiciness. Exterior, brown is beautiful, crunchy, beautiful, flavorful exterior. Okay? Are we with me? And the same thing on a gas grill. You have one or two burners. The more burners, the better. So if you're buying a gas grill, go for 3, 4 burners, but at least 2. Get at least 2 burners so you can set up 2 zones. You want 2 zones. And these are just some pictures of what I showed you. Look at the bottom 2. The middle one, number 2, was cooked the normal way. Sear first and keep cooking. And you can see there's a layer of well done right below the surface. The bottom one was cooked indirect sear. Very, very thin overcooked layer. Beautiful medium rare in between. Now, how many of you are grossed out by that pink color? Yeah, too much. Too juicy, too bloody for you? Too bloody for you? It's not blood. It's not blood. The juice that you see in a steak is not blood. That blood has all been removed during the slaughter. Animal blood is just like our blood. It's dark red. It's thick. It's almost black. And if it's spilled out, it would be really thick and coagulate. It would harden. The juices that come out of a steak are thin. It's water. It's water, and it's pink only because of the color, the pigments of a protein called myoglobin. And myoglobin makes it pink. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Roast your food in a roasting pan. Now this goes for, here's your Thanksgiving turkey. This is your Thanksgiving turkey. On the left is your Thanksgiving turkey. You've got a big old roasting pan with that V-shaped rack. You put the turkey in there, and you can see the bottom never gets hot because the water in the bottom of the pan, you almost always put water so it doesn't drip and burn. The bottom is going to be about 240 degrees. And how many of you know this? You bring that turkey out, and the top side is beautiful gold GBD, golden brown and delicious, and the bottom is sort of pale and sad looking, gooey and wet. What you want to do is raise the meat up so the warm air can circulate all around it. And in the right-hand side, you see a turkey on the grill. It's cooking on the grate, and the pan is well below it. Now air can circulate all around. It browns all around. It cooks evenly. You don't have it overcooked on one side and undercooked on the other. And when I cook a turkey, and this recipe's in the book, we're going to put onions, celery, carrots, little white wine, some herbs, and we're going to put all that in the drip pan. We're going to take the neck from the chicken. We're going to trim around the cavity, get all the fat off of there. We're going to chop off the ends of the wings. All that's going in the drip pan. We're making a turkey soup. We're making a turkey soup in that drip pan underneath there, and it's getting all the flavorful juices. Yes, ma'am?
Are you recommending putting a roasting pan on the grill and then another grill above that?
Or if you can, depending on what kind of grill you have, like on a gas grill, you can put the roasting pan, and I use just an inexpensive stainless steel or porcelain pan, not your fancy heavy-duty $250 roasting pan. And I put it underneath and right on top of the gas burners. On a charcoal grill, we're cooking indirect, so the coals are all off on one side, The pan's off on the other side. All the drippings are falling down on that grate. You can also, and I've done this too, you can also put the pan on the grill grates, put another grate, more like the middle picture, right on top of it there, and that's a good second option. And you can still collect all those juices and make one heck of a turkey stock, and that's your gravy base. You strain that off, and that is the most wonderful gravy. You won't want to add flour to it. You won't want to add thickener to it. That stuff just makes it thick. It sits on top of the meat. It won't penetrate the meat. It won't give it any flavor. You'll just take this wonderful turkey soup, and that's your gravy, and it's fantastic. But in either case, whether it's a turkey or a beef roast or a pork roast, get it up above the pan so it can cook all around. Here, we talked about this earlier, the red juice is blood. It's not, it's myoglobin. It's a liquid, it's almost all water with a little pigment. And you've seen it in chicken and in pork. They all put that little spongy material underneath it when you buy the package in the store that absorbs the juices. And it's pink. It's myoglobin. Okay, big hunks of meat. Anybody here ever do pork shoulder to make pulled pork? Hands, briskets. Yeah, okay, good. Legs of lamb. Get the fat cap off. You're told that the fat cap will melt and baste the meat and penetrate the meat because fat is flavor. We all know that. That's true. That's not a husband's tale. But the fat that's flavor is the fat that's woven within the meat. It's called marbling. The fat that sits on top of the meat is no good to anybody. You're going to sprinkle the spices and the herbs on that fat cap, and then when you serve it, the first thing everybody does is cut off the fat cap, and there go all your spices and herbs. This picture here, it's not my best photography, forgive me, but in the top picture, same piece of meat. You can see it's pretty much the same meat. The colors have shifted a little with air. But the top piece of meat, I dug a hole in a piece of beef, filled it with olive oil. And that's 33 seconds into it took me a while to focus. And then the bottom one is 10 minutes later. Pardon me, no, that's 9 hours. That's 9 hours. 9 hours and 58 minutes. The fat goes nowhere. Why? Meat is 70% water. Oil and water don't mix. The fat on your fat cap is not penetrating the meat. It's not going anywhere. It's not doing you any good. Get rid of it. If you want, what I do when I'm doing a brisket or a pulled pork or something that has a fat cap, like a leg of lamb, I'll leave a thin layer. Because people will eat a thin layer of fat. And it will get really good flavor. I mean, what was the movie we were talking about this the other day, Carrie. Little kids asking people at the table, "You going to eat your fat?" Somebody in here knows this movie. It's a Rodney Dangerfield movie. This little kid. "You going to eat your fat? You going to eat your fat?" Fat is flavorful. Bone-in steak is better. Another myth. I know that we love to gnaw on the bone, and that's fun, and that's a good reason to leave the bone in a ribeye. But the bone doesn't give you any flavor. Now, that myth came about because if you take something like beef ribs and put them in a crock pot or a stew pot or a Dutch oven, and you put in your sauce, you're making up a little red wine and some stock and some seasonings, and you pop it in the oven or you turn on the crock pot, that will extract the flavor from the bone. But it doesn't extract any flavor from the bone in a dry cooking method like the oven or the grill. You can see in the cross-section of the bone, that compact bone portion is pure calcium. Calcium has no flavor, none that we can taste. The yellow marrow has flavor, but it can't get out. What the bone does do is it interferes with even heating. And it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that the dark red areas around that T-bone don't heat up as much as the other areas because the bone is like the heat shield on the space shuttle. It interferes with the heat. Now, as the bone heats up, it'll retain heat more and it actually gets hot. But the bone doesn't do anything for flavor, and it will alter the heating properties. So when I'm doing a ribeye, I will often remove the bones. Of course, the way I do ribeye is a little, you know, you would expect me to do it weird. I'll buy a whole beef rib roast with 7 bones in it. And I'll cut the whole slab of beef ribs off, and that I will cook as a separate meal. Beef ribs, wonderful. And I'll then take this round, big old roast and cut it into ribeye steaks. Now I have my own ribeye steaks cut perfectly to my specifications. I like them about 1.5 inches. And so I have now boneless ribeye steaks, and when I cook them, the heat enters all sides evenly, and they cook perfectly even. And I have a slab of beef bones that I can cook for beef ribs for another meal. Here's another myth. Let meat come to room temperature. Take it out of the fridge, let it sit on the table for a couple hours. Well, I tried that. I took a steak, stuck a thermocouple in it, and waited for it to come to room temperature. About 1.5 inch steak. I think it took maybe 3 hours to come to room temp. If you went to a restaurant and they said, yeah, we got your steak sitting out. They've been out for a couple hours. We'll put it in the oven right now. You'd head for the door. It is not a very safe practice to let meat sit around at room temp for very long. And a roast, a 4-inch thick roast, takes 10 hours to come to room temp. But there's another reason why you don't want to do it. Cold surfaces attract smoke. Just like when you get out of the shower, the cold surface of the bathroom mirrors attracts steam, and your mirrors steam up. Well, smoke will be attracted to the meat that is cold out of the fridge. And this picture shows you the experiment we did. The white can on the right is the control. It sat on my desk. The can in the middle is empty, and it went on the smoker. The can on the left was filled with ice water. And you can see not only did it attract a lot of smoke, but moisture started running down the surface. Wet surfaces also glom smoke and hold on to it. So smoke is a lovely flavor. You can't get it on your spice rack. So you can get it on the grill. So go cold meat on the grill and you'll attract more smoke flavor. You'll get more flavor that way. Liquid smoke is nice. It is made from natural smoke, but it's not the same. It's gone through a transformation and it's not the same. Natural smoke, fresh from the cooker, really tastes nice. So cold food, maximum smoke. Yeah, well, of course, you do want to defrost in your fridge. You do not want to defrost on the counter. Now, there is some new research. USDA did some research that shows you can actually defrost in hot water. And you got to be careful about it, and I don't have time to get into that, but I do talk about it on the website. I think it's mentioned in the book. But defrosting is another issue, and there are several ways to defrost, but the best way is just leave it in the fridge. If your fridge is 38, check your refrigerator temperature, thermometers. 38 degrees or less, 33 to 38, that's your sweet spot. Microbes don't like that temp. They will not grow rapidly. You get up over 40 and they start growing. And at room temp, they double in population every 20 minutes. So you don't want to leave things sitting around at room temp. Soak your wood. This is another one that just won't go away. All the books tell you, soak your wood chips, your chunks, before you put them on the fire for flavor. If you soak wood, well, first of all, why would you soak wood? Because, you know, they build boats out of wood for a reason. Wood doesn't absorb water. And it's kind of hard to tell, but I took some water and stained it blue with some food dye. And you can see in these pictures that on the left-hand side is the exterior of the wood. And you can see a little bit of water stain on there, but not much. When I took wood and soaked it, not just for an hour or two like the barbecue books tell you, but overnight, then patted it dry, they gained about 3% weight. That's all. And all of that was on the surface. You can see that a number 1, that's the exterior on the left, I cut it open. The wet spot, you see the one little wet spot? It was a crack in the wood. Little water got in through the crack. That's it. Bone dry inside. Hardly anything visible on the exterior. The middle one is a raw chunk of wood. You can see there's a little bit of blue stain to the exterior, but the interior, again, the only wet spots were the cracks and crevices. And then a little chip. It's hard to see from this picture, but there was no penetration of water at all. Now, when you take wet wood and throw it on a charcoal fire, what happens? You wet the fire. You lower the temperature. You reduce the temp. You've lost control of your heat. You want to get your fire to an even temperature, your target temperature, 225 in the indirect zone most of the time, and you don't want to throw cold water on it. So there's no need to wet your wood before you cook. And in fact, there's another good reason not to. There's different kinds of smoke. You can have black smoke, gray smoke, brown smoke, yellow smoke, white smoke, and blue smoke. White smoke and blue smoke taste good. The best tasting smoke is blue smoke. And blue smoke is almost invisible. Let's see if I've got that slide. Yes. White billowing smoke is good, and a lot of us look for it. And we say when we throw the wet wood on the fire, we see lots of billowing smoke. It's not smoke, it's steam. Wood doesn't combust till 575 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Water boils at 212. You throw wet wood on a fire, the first thing that happens is you have to boil off the water before the wood can combust. So what you're seeing is steam. But once you get it going, white smoke has a good flavor, but it's not as good flavor as very pale, almost invisible smoke. Blue smoke is almost invisible. The particles in the smoke are so small, they barely refract light. So it's called blue smoke, and it's the goal of pitmasters. Now, I hear people all the time saying, I've got a gas grill, and I put the wood chips in a little aluminum pan, or I wrap them up in foil, throw it on the fire, and they catch on fire and burn up. How do I prevent that? That's good. You want the wood to burn. You don't want it to smolder. When it smolders, it's starving for oxygen. You're getting billowing white smoke. You want the wood to burn vigorously. Barbecue pits, the big ones, they cook with wood. They don't let it smolder. They throw the logs on there and it catches on fire. It's hard to keep the temperature down once they're burning with flame, but that gives you the purest, best flavor smoke. So don't worry if your wood chips catch on fire. Another myth, rubs and marinades penetrate the meat, tenderize it, and flavor it. That's a piece of chicken, I think. Maybe a pork chop. I forget which one that is. Made a basic marinade, some oil and some vinegar and some flavorings, and mixed in some green food coloring. The green food coloring went nowhere. Sucrose, sugar, garlic, paprika, black pepper. These are huge molecules. They cannot penetrate the meat. They can get into some pores and cracks and crevices on the surface. They cannot get deep into the meat. The only thing that goes deep into meat is salt. Salt is magic. Salt is the magic rock. It's sodium and chloride, and when they get wet, they get electrically charged, they create ions, and they move, and they go down. And you can see there's a pale line just below the surface where the salt has been penetrating. This was, I think, 5 or 6 hours. I forget how long. But the salt goes on, and it goes into the center. And salt works magic. Salt attacks the protein and denatures it and changes its structure so that it holds moisture longer. So you want to salt your meat. But when you put spices and rubs or marinades on the surface of the meat, they don't go beyond the surface. They flavor the surface. You get wonderful flavors from them, but they're not getting into the center. And if we cook this up and we took a core sample out of the center, you wouldn't taste any of those spices and herbs. Beer can chicken. Oh, I've gotten more hate mail on this one. This is the one that gets me the worst hate mail. We don't have any problems with trolls and hate mail on the website. We have no pre-screening of comments. People love barbecue. They love to talk it, except this. Well, there's one other page. The page that says, don't put ketchup on hot dogs. It's a comedy piece. It's a humor piece. It's got a whole bunch of quotes from people. I get more vile, How dare you tell me not to put ketchup on hot dogs? It's a joke. It's a joke. It really is. You can tell it's a joke. Anybody with a sense of humor. I think if you put ketchup on hot dogs, it takes away your sense of humor. I don't know. Beer can chicken. Everybody know what a beer koozie is? Little piece of foam rubber that you put around a beer can, you know, and it's supposed to keep your beer cold. What do you think a 38-degree, 3.5-pound chicken is? It's a chicken koozie. It keeps the beer cold. You put it up the butt of the chicken, and now you have a large thermal mass that comes out of the refrigerator at 38 degrees. The beer never gets beyond the temperature of the meat. It can't. It doesn't boil. It doesn't steam. Steaming temperature is 212 degrees. If you cook the meat safely to 160, 165 degrees, the beer rarely goes above 150. If you overcook the hell out of it and blacken it and take it up to 190 or something, the beer still won't go over 190 degrees. It can't boil. You weigh the can before, you weigh the can after, it weighs the same. In fact, in a few cases when we tried it, when we weighed the can after, it actually weighed more because the fat from the chicken dripped into the can, coated the surface, and of course that went further to prevent the beer from evaporating. So beer can chicken is cool. It looks cool. I mean, doesn't that little chicken sitting there looking like a little human being look cool? But the beer can chicken devotees say, but everybody loves my beer can chicken. It's so good. It's delicious. Of course it's delicious. It's roast chicken. Everybody loves roast chicken. It's hard to mess up roast chicken unless you overcook it. Only it's not roasted as well as it could be. If you take the beer can out, warm air will enter the center and it'll cook from the inside as well as the outside. You won't overcook the exterior. In fact, for me, I'll cut it into quarters, cut it up into pieces, cook the pieces separately. That way you can brown both sides, not just the exterior. You can get maximum brown. And you can temp each piece of meat individually and get each piece of meat off at the optimum temperature. So beer can chicken may be delicious, but it's far from the best way of cooking chicken. It does look cool, though. Anybody hate me now? Somebody out there? Somebody left a minute ago. He was really upset. He was really upset, I could tell. No. Another one. I'm running out of time here. I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Lump charcoal is better. It looks natural. It looks like God gave us this charcoal. The briquettes look like somebody made them in a factory. Well, they did. But I tell you, the briquettes are just as good, if not better, and there's a whole bunch of reasons. Among them is the process of making charcoal means carbonizing the wood. And if you don't carbonize it thoroughly, which is a problem when you make it from lump charcoal, it can belch out a lot of smoke and you don't know where the smoke is coming from, what the wood is. I want to control the wood flavor by choosing my own wood. Charcoal is for heat, wood is for flavor. So you want to get, I much prefer briquettes because they're known entities of heat. I really can't take much more time to talk about this later. And my final myth is barbecue is for guys. Well, there are more and more women. Now, our Google analytics are telling us that we're running around 75 to 80% male. So it's still a backyard guy thing. And I don't know why for sure. I know this. The anthropologists, the scientists tell us that the first Homo erectus were the first of our ancestors to cook. Homo erectus, the guys were the hunters and the girls were the pit masters. The first women were the pit masters, or pit mistresses, if you will. How they ceded control over fire to men may be the same way they lost control over the remote control. I don't know how this happened. I do know that we're seeing more and more women cooking outdoors. I think part of it is that women just want guys to have their fun. Have their space, let them think they're doing something useful, that they're actually cooking, they're contributing to the family welfare. It's sort of like faking orgasm, I think, you know? But more and more women are grilling, and I say let them have it. That's less work for me. All right, well, that's covers there are more myths than that in the book. There's a lot more than this in the book. I hope we had some fun and answered some questions and busted a few of your myths. Do we have more questions? I think we got a couple of minutes left. Well, we started 5 minutes late, so. Yes, sir. Oh, that's right. I was told to ask you to go to the microphone with questions.
I have a question. So I recently, actually it wasn't that recently ago, but I was asking this Argentinian guy, like, how come in Argentina, like, you are such famous pit masters and yet your steaks are always well done? And his answer was like, well, that's just because here they don't really understand how to cook well-done steaks in a way that is delicious. What's your take on this? Can you cook well-done steaks in a way that's delicious? Do they really have something over us there?
No. Yeah, it can be delicious. The flavor can be on the surface. But we know that when you well cook a steak, the water evaporates, it dries out. It also chemically binds to the compounds on the interior, and it gets really dry and hard. So I mean, if you go into a steakhouse where they have really beautiful USDA prime or Wagyu steaks and they're aged, and you ask for well done, you'll probably get a cheaper grade of steak than everybody else at the table. Oh, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I didn't see the gentleman.
Sure, okay. While you were trying to bust the myths about grilling, you had to come across a few that were actually true. Was there any that you think are really, really useful that we should continue to adhere to?
Gosh. Well, well, I think that the general overall view that anything you cook indoors, you can cook outdoors, only better is a good one. I like that. I mean, it is just an outdoor oven, but you've got this extra element of open flame and smoke that really adds to the flavor compounds. I mean, there's a lot of what we've been taught that is true, that does work. I think briquettes are, they've been around forever. I think briquettes are better than lump charcoal for a variety of reasons. We ran out of time. But yeah, there's just, I'm drawing a blank for others, but the book is full of them. You have to buy the book.
Okay, so just this year, we have a place where we can actually have a grill, and we got one. And there was this big debate between me and my boyfriend over like gas versus charcoal and all this kind of stuff. Ultimately, for various reasons, we went with gas. But so you were talking about how some people with gas grills, they put the wood in like foil or something like that. If there's not like a specific slot on your grill like there are for some, where do you put it? Do you put it down below the flames, on top of the grate?
On top of the heating elements, as close as you can to the heating elements so they'll combust. Okay. And you can make, you can get a disposable aluminum pan. I have an old cast iron pan that I throw down in there. Find something that'll hold the wood that you can put right down on the burners. Get it as hot as you can. Right. By the way, I'll sign books if you're buying them. I'll hang out and sign books for you. If they'll let me just hang out. I don't know. Can I hang out? Tell me if I can no longer take questions. Can I, Chris? Last one. Well, we got two there. Okay, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm curious, what's a better grill, Weber, Green Egg, Kenmore? Do you have like a favorite preference?
I have favorites. I have this guy, Max, who tests grills. And he's the real expert on it. Weber is just as good as gold, always reliable. They have inventory parts inventory going back decades. Something breaks, they're there to help you. I love their products. They're not always the latest, keenest, some of the coolest new developments are by other manufacturers. But I don't think you'll ever go wrong with a Weber, and they all work well. Big Green Eggs are nice. They're a very different concept, very different thermodynamic properties. I think of them as better smokers than grills. They're great pizza ovens. They cook really well in cold climates. Not my all-time favorite. I know Green Egg people are rabid about them, and if there's one in here, he'll probably jump up on the stage and strangle me. But they're not my all-time favorites. And Kenmore, I'm not too familiar with the various models that they make.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And if you did buy a book, I'd be happy to sign it for you.
That was great. Super educational. Thank you very much,
Thank
Meathead.
you.